Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Bald Explorer Live, the reading this afternoon of the Sussex Peep Show. And we are continuing with our episodes, following in the footsteps of Walter Wilkinson, our hero puppeteer who's wandering around Sussex with a barrow full of goodies. Hopefully I have the camera sorted out. Oh, I've just had two adverts before I got to the live stream, says Nigel Sadler. I'm sorry about that. I don't know how that comes out. Maybe I have accidentally monetized these, but anyway. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a little a bit early than normal, but I'm pleased about that because we had a few issues with the camera, and I think I've sorted it all out a bit. Looks chilly in the studio, says Nigel. Yes, this back room of mine doesn't get very much heat, I have to say. So it is a little bit chilly. TurboStream is there. Good afternoon to you. And John Morris, hello to you. Lovely to see you. TurboStream says, we can see you today. Yes, thank goodness for that. I remembered to press the go live button. Nigel says, it has never happened before. No, of course, it's never happened before. Only occasionally. Only occasionally. So... It's 4 o'clock now, so that's all good. I'm hoping that we can finish this book this week, which would be rather good. A Sussex Peep Show. The paper cover, the dust jacket, seems to be in a right old state, even though I've taken it off. Every time I touch it, it seems to fall to bits even more. Billabong O'Neill, good afternoon to you. Very nice of you to pop by. Hope the lovely Julia has managed to make it, because I left her at the school. I went over for lunch and we had a sneak preview of one of the edits that I've been working on for the boat trip. I think I've edited day 4 now. So it's nice to have a few in the hand. I'm trying to work on them this week. May work on day 5 this evening. And they're going out. Hope you're enjoying those. And I had to rush off because I wanted to check the camera and everything. So I left her at the school with the strolling thing. And I haven't heard that she managed to get back. I'm sure she did. Lee Lawson, hello to you. Just had a surprise visit from our granddaughter calling in on her way home from school. She's gone now. Well, don't worry. You haven't missed anything. We haven't started. And TurboStream says, I had an advert on my tablet, but not on my TV. Philip and Mary, hello. I had a nice conversation with Mary a few moments ago, actually, talking about jumpers. I should have put Mary's blue jumper on, and maybe I'll put it on tomorrow. But yeah, it's a little bit chilly, so I've got my scarf on my jacket. Anyway, we left our heroes. Where did we leave them? Climbing Duncton Hill, if I remember rightly. And I'm just double checking where we did. And it goes up to Up Waltham, didn't they? Yeah, and then I left it there, if I remember rightly. We were fidgety. There was neither... Oh, that's right, because they were looking for food and they'd run out of food. And we were fidgety, for there was neither shop nor any prospect for a show, and we were drawn on the idea that Eartham, a few miles away, would furnish us with one or the other, or possibly both. And near Eartham is a very good example of a Roman road that runs through there. So I wonder if they're going to have a go on that. The sun blazed down on the road, and we were soon lost in the heat and the influence of the expansive country, the wild acres of wind-swept grass, with only Up Waltham in the valley below us, and the figure of one tiny man ploughing a field in the bottoms. So much earth and so much silence. The lovely Julia has arrived. Hello, Julia. Well done. Hope you got home all right. I did feel a bit guilty whizzing off, leaving you there. So much... whatever it was, I've lost my space now. So much earth and so much silence. There was grass by the roadside to rest on, and all the heavens to survey. a great lovely green world of simple placid forms that decorated itself only with the few flowers in the hedgerows. We walked calmly, some would say idly, with the feeling that this tramping would go on easily forever through this green field and sunlight. At all events, we would arrive in Eartham in time for tea, shopping and performance. I don't think there's much in Eartham, is there? Then Winifred discovered some wild strawberries. We searched for some time, gathering a sufficiently large handful to make them worth eating. It was a fascinating pursuit, and we hunted after the silly little berries among the intricacies of the wayside bank. It took us into a charming fairyland of blue speedwells and red campions, of sorrel and the bright bird's-foot trefoil, exquisite little blooms screened by the bladed and seeded grasses. Again it was Winifred who began threading the toy fruits on a long stalk of grass, and with such zeal that she was often lost in the bushes while the barrow was propelling itself dutifully towards Eartham. But the chain of strawberries once begun, the collector's mania seized us, and Eartham was forgotten in the tyrannical fascination of hunting the wild red strawberry. Cars and charabancs thundered by, and many great things were on the road and in the world besides. But there was more wonder and beauty, more miracles and marvels in every square inch of that grassy bank of fruit and flowers than in all the abominable monstrosities on the road put together. 84 berries filled the length of grass, and when complete, the string of red fruits, surmounted by the tassel of seeds, was a gay totem of the afternoon's expedition into fairyland. With the last berry we remembered our earthly mission, pulled along a quiet road, handsome and heavy with trees, until we arrived, rather behind time, at the village of Eartham. The search for a camp in the large estate surrounding the village took us a great deal further. A bailiff had to be discovered before the tent could be pitched, and we saw much more of the countryside than was necessary for the good of our souls before that amiable gentleman very kindly put us into one of his pastures. By the time the camp was set up and we were refreshed, safely and restfully enclosed in a great meadow, the road and the show business did not appear at all attractive. As Eartham seemed to consist mainly of one modest inn and a very prominent yellow enamel plate announcing the name of the village, which hardly seemed to exist, we could not muster up the inspiration to pack up, tramp a couple of miles, and perform to nobody at about 10 o'clock in the evening. We were more in mind for a good supper, but here, again, was an English village without the characteristic general shop. Several village schools in the district we knew had been closed, and the children were being collected and driven into Slindon by omnibus. Can it be that the village shop is disappearing on account of modern transport, because of the distribution of commodities by motor vans from the larger towns? Behind the tent was one of those tiny timbered cottages, so heavily thatched that it resembled a beehive, and we wondered if we could extract some food from its larder. But the woman had nothing to spare for us. There was only enough bread for the family. The lettuces were too small, and the cabbages so young that her conscience would not have permitted her to cut one had we been really starving. She could direct us to the nearest shop, 2 miles away, and she could tell us how she walked habitually, even as far as 6 miles, to do her shopping. In the face of such circumstances, we could hardly press any further in the matter, and we returned to the tent, marooned in this modern England, which more and more becomes dependent upon conventional shopping and loses its old sense of the needs of strangers and travellers. We were condemned to compose a meal out of a few potatoes, a small piece of cheese, and some butter. For some time, Winifred hovered over a sizzling pot, filled the tent with gratifying odours, and in spite of the shortage of shops, we supped uncommonly well. There was a great going down of the sun at the end of an immense pasture that evening. We wandered in the wood, gathering dry leaves for our mattresses, and we went to sleep calmly and full of assurance, for only 2 miles away, and to be easily reached in the morning, was a shop. Just pause for a moment, make sure everyone's all right. We were thoroughly rained on. Oh, Julia, I'm so sorry. I reckon you're used to that, Julia, says John. Yes, but it's not fun when I'm not on the back of a canal boat. Yeah, that's true. Good practice should you ever wish to take up the post of master of the super tanker. Absolutely. So hello to Morton Lewis and to John Foster, to Andrew Norris as well. In the morning, another voluble cottage woman gave us our directions. She was also habituated to walking several miles for her groceries, and was able to admire our pedestrian business as a good idea. The bailiff, like a kind host, hoped that we had enjoyed a good night in his meadow, and with such amiable sentiments in the mild morning, we set off out on the quiet by-road. We walked between the rife growth of the untrimmed verges, the wind whispering through the tall herbs, and it was so very quiet that the strawberry hunting mood came down upon us again, and we loitered complacently, falling into absurd ecstasies over the colour and intricate form of one small wild flower, or we stood looking up into the heart of an ash tree, rhapsodising on the pattern of the slender leaves silhouetted against the blue sky. We did not realise this foolishness and contentment until the by-road came to an end, and we found ourselves face to face with real life again. The benign mood soon vanished on the fierce and tarry way, with the flurry of the constantly passing cars. Divine thoughts gave way to an agitated attention upon the gutter, and to keep our pedestrian way out of the route of the roaring behemoths. We also longed and longed for the next signpost that would direct us down another by-road. We were the only live, unmotored creatures on the road. All the others were dead. Here a thrush lay on his back, its stiff legs raised pathetically in the air. Here a rat had been caught and squashed. Then it was another bird with broken wings, scattered feathers, or a slow mole which had been caught by the wheels. That road was no place for a pedestrian. We walked in fear and discomfort. At the Fontwell racecourse, we came to the shop. The barrow was deserted in a trice, and we descended on the store with all the pent-up shopping energy of the last 3 days. It was altogether an exceptional shop, and we staggered back to the barrow beneath a load of good food, of soups and spaghetti, cereals and fruits, cakes, biscuits, tea and coffee, and a golden pot of marmalade, which was very difficult to stow away into our restricted compartments. We passed on like a travelling grocer's shop, with occasional stoppages to pick up escaped oranges, or to chase one of those little round boxes of cheese trundling itself merrily across the road. We turned from the main road, but not to escape from traffic problems or to wander away into the ways of peace. Watergate and Eastergate were two of the villages that we had to choose from for our professional operations. But it was in an uncomfortable place with the vulgar name of Barnum, where we set up the tent and the show that night. After Fontwell, we walked a perpetual suburbia, with our barrow overladen with groceries. A grocer's shop flaunted itself in our faces every 5 minutes. Where Westergate began or Eastergate ended we shall never know, for we walked between villas, tiny little gardens, until we loathed the sight of clipped hedges and patent building materials, which seemed to have obscured the villages with the pretty names. If we asked for a camp, it was to be sent further on. There were no farms or sane fields in this district, nothing but market gardens, greenhouses, and intensive cultivation that took no account of two respectable vagabonds who wanted to pitch their tent. Very useful knowledge, of course, and very gratifying to find so many busy and apparently successful market gardeners, and to know where our tomatoes and mushrooms come from, but we would have been better pleased with a plain grass meadow and a chance of sitting down to an orgy of our newly acquired food. Barnum at last received us into a new mown hayfield. There were houses on 3 sides and a busy, pestiferous little railway on the 4th. We had passed from the one extreme to the other. We had carried our burden of shopping for about 4 miles, and here we were with shops all around us and the best bakery on the south coast, but 50 yards away. We had asked for a shop, and we had been given 100. We wanted a few more houses, and now we found ourselves encircled and surveyed by houses like campers in a nightmare. But all this civilization had one advantage. The sharp eyes of the children had recognized our profession, and a polite but firm deputation waited upon us in the field, demanding a performance. In spite of the restless neighbourhood, the children gathered round. Cottage doors were opened, and children, being hastily wrapped in coats, were dispatched with pennies in their hands to see the show. Women and men joined the children, and they thought the show worthy of greater things, of splendours of Littlehampton, or of the vast crowds at Brighton. We relished their appreciation, but still we hoped to avoid the success they thought we merited. Interesting that he didn't want the larger crowds of the bigger towns, and that he preferred the little villages. I suppose the little villages are such that the people are more down to earth and less cynical, I guess, and more approving of these vagabond shows. Anyway, that was the end of that chapter. We're on chapter 10 now, Down to the Sea. It's interesting thinking about Westergate and Eastergate, and he's quite right. I mean, 100 years, it hasn't overly changed, although, of course, the outer rims of that area have a whole load of new builds in the fields that potentially they could have camped in, I suppose. What have we got here? Morton says, walk 6 miles to do the shop. Wonder if that was 3 there and 3 back, or 6 there and 6 back. Yes, that's true. People don't walk at all now. I have to walk for our groceries, says Sir Andrew Norris, unless I can dig them up. Ah, yes. If you can dig them up, that's grand. Nigel says, you have not trained Zorro to fetch them? He asks. And Andrew says he loves to dig, but not in the right places. I can quite see that. Barnum and surrounding area is still covered in glass houses. Yes, that's very true, actually. There's a lot of, if I remember rightly, Dutch tomatoes there. Van somebody or other. They call themselves not Van de Volk, but Van something or other. Andrew Norris says, the guy speaks your language, Richard. He certainly does. Ronald Millwood, has Richard run out of logs? Yes, I haven't so much run out of logs, except that even if I had them on, the back room barely heats up. There is a fireplace just to my right, actually, that hasn't got a grate or anything in it, and would be awkward to light. Although it would be lovely to do that in the studio. If ever I can get to clear this and put the camera even further back and sort out the lights, it would be lovely to have a real fire in the studio at the back in the winter. So, chapter 10, Down to the Sea. Hope you're enjoying it, by the way. We moved out of Barnham, a little richer in pennies and well nourished, but with the feeling that to play at being gypsies within a circle of houses is an exceedingly odd experience. You are dissatisfied with the tent, which under the circumstances is inadequate in privacy, and you're dissatisfied with all the superior little houses that have bathrooms and large cooking stoves and clothes pegs, and which seem to have been staring at you disdainfully over the weekend. So we pulled along the pebbly lane away from Barnham with the rising spirits and our faces to the sea. By degrees, we emerged from the land of small holdings and small buildings and began to rediscover the older and more spacious Sussex. Away from the houses, we could see again the green downs rising over the flat fields, and realised that to be in Sussex without seeing them, one might as well be anywhere else in the world. They were the key to the country, and with their varied forms being played upon the cloud shadows, we walked contentedly among the cornfields and meadowlands, by the hedgerows of sweet-smelling flowers. There were sprawling old farms again, and the aged mansion at the corner of the road by Ford, where we sat under a green willow to eat from paper bags and to drink from bottles, while the cattle, standing in the pond to shelter from the burning sun and the biting flies, looked at us with mild, inquisitive eyes. No windows overlooked us there. We could make good use of the glorious day by being lazy, and without our consciences being stirred by all the dusting, sweeping, and cooking of 100 industrious housewives. We dreamt away the midday hours, and wandered on in the pursuit of business to the next village on the map, Klimping. Here, having unwarily looked at the guidebook, we were impelled by the author's enthusiasm to do the church, but found it very much restored, overburdened with modern sentiment, and a rather self-conscious showpiece, and I'm afraid that we were more interested in the class of schoolgirls who were distributed about the village, making watercolour drawings, craning our necks a good deal to get a sight of their efforts. And we committed a grave faux pas in mistaking the schoolmistress for the farmer's wife, and in asking the startled lady for an encampment. As it happened, the wrong person was quite the right one in this case, and we took our request, on her advice, to the cottage behind the ancient church. Now, Klimping has been famous for its Christian church for centuries, but to us it is now famous for something perhaps a little more important, and that the Christian behaviour of its inhabitants. We knocked at the cottage door, and once more repeated our eternal begging for a pitch to the lady who appeared. "Well," she exclaimed with intense pleasure and satisfaction, "me and my husband were only saying today what a good place this garden would be for a tent. Do you think it would? Would you like to put your tent up over there? It's just made for it." We gasped at this reversal of the usual situation. We were accustomed to be beggars, but here we were being asked to oblige the proprietor. "I'm sure you would like it, or would you rather go there?" Our kindness of ladies led the way to another small orchard garden. "Well, if you like it, do set up, but you'll have to look after yourselves. I'm just taking the children to the beach. You'll find a pump of water in the kitchen, and I think there's a drop of milk too. Help yourselves. Sorry, I must go." And on this very short acquaintance, the lady went off to her affairs, and we were left to the garden, the freedom of the open house, and a splendid opportunity to run off with the whole estate, if we were so inclined. But we have only behaved as the majority of people would have done under the circumstances. It would have been a bold villain that would have done otherwise. We crept into the kitchen like mice, drew some water without spilling a drop on the floor, and requisitioned only sufficient milk for our tea. The question of camping so happily decided, we set out to explore the possibility of giving a performance. Our immediate surroundings were one empty house, a church with nobody in it, a forge closed, and with no smith. Then there was the farm, with all the hands miles away in the field making hay. An impromptu performance in that part would not find much encouragement. A little further down the road we came to 2 cottages, but they had been completely gutted by fire, and naturally enough we sought a little further from our quarry. We came out to the main road, and found a house or two, at least I remember distinctly seeing one which was to let, and the main road was so thick with shattering traffic that nothing but a cannon of the larger size would have made its voice heard there. Punch and Judy showing was a lost art for the time being, and we consoled ourselves with watching the end of a cricket match, a matter of much buckling on and off of pads, of solemn journeys to the wicket, a determined pose at the crease, a glorious swipe or two, and the "out! Caught!" Then we found the path to the beach, and walked by the storm-bent trees into the wind. Behind us the village barns and the great green trees grouped themselves magnificently and richly, and a great strong symphony of English greens and sunset gold standing out from the level fields of the pale line of the downs greeted us. A Sussex scene, simplified and rarefied by its proximity to the sea, the first beginnings of the county after the shingle beach, and the first mile of sparse flat meadows. We had walked over the downs to the sea, and the sudden sight of the great waters washed the dust of weeks from our eyes. We splashed in the green waves on the very southernmost edge of Sussex, an act symbolical of having walked through the breadth, if not the length, of the land. It was clear, and the light was lovely, and the strange novelty to walk from the hedgerows and from under the shadow of trees to the wet open beach, and to feel the sting of the salty wind on our faces, but yet we had a guilty feeling that we ought not have been there. As showmen, we looked on the world with other eyes, and we saw what other, more innocently situated people would not see. A large warning board emblazoned with dire threats against anything so wicked as a chocolate seller, so criminal as a ice cream vendor, and so entirely abandoned as a wandering minstrel or an itinerant artist. From the retired orchard behind the church at Klimping, we set out to make an attack upon Littlehampton. All the world was diverging upon the town, and every vehicle that roared past us took 10 years off our lives. It was a relief to park the ignominious barrow and walk about the town as other pedestrians, which were only able to do after ascertaining that a Punch and Judy show was operating on the beach, and consequently we were relieved from professional duties. With its numerous flint Littlehampton retains a local Sussex character Littlehampton retains a local Sussex character most marvellously for a modern watering place. With its wide green, removing the houses and shops away from the sea, and its spreading sands, it retains an innocence quite rare. Even the windmill, which was there when the children... I've lost my rhythm. Even the windmill, which was there when we were children, is still a gentle, declining ruin, and lends a companionable shabbiness to the town. Kites sail over the grass on the green, obstinate donkeys and brisk ponies played their part, while the sands and the shallow waters were a pretty ballet of family parties playing the improvised beach games. Minute boys, aloof from the vulgar throng, were doing nothing immensely seriously with pieces of driftwood, or the tiny girls with brown limbs and fair hair flying were dancing their way ecstatically through 2 meagre holiday weeks of real life. Through this merry crowd, our confrere, the Punch and Judy man, threaded his way. Setting up his booth, now here, now there, giving, he told us, from 12 to 20 performances a day. It is, of course, I've read that completely wrong as well. And this is an interesting thing, because Lee Lawson is watching, and her grandfather was a Punch and Judy man, and we don't think that this was him, but a rival. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that. Confrere, is it? Confrere? His competition, I guess, is what it means. Through this merry crowd, our confrere, the Punch and Judy man, threaded his way, setting up his booth now here, now there, giving, he told us, from 12 to 20 performances a day. It is, of course, the influence of having to pay large rents for these seaside pitches that makes the showman skimp his work and scurry through as many penny collectings as he possibly can. We stood with our noses to the show, but the time-honoured jokes could not be heard. It may have been an apprentice learning his trade, but I'm afraid that these shows trade on the sentimental, which encompasses them so richly. Some feeble wagging of the badly made figures suggest the good thing they might have been, and sympathetic passers-by in holiday mood are easily caught and collected from. Leaving all the pennies in Littlehampton to the genuine old show, we trudged away with our box unopened and our pieces unperformed. All along the road to Wick were bills advertising a village fair at Lyminster, and we calculated that it would just suit our casual way of doing business if we could stroll into Lyminster, obtain a pitch for the night, and perform at that fair the next day. Very well. We arrived in Lyminster, discovered that the fair was arranged in aid of church funds, and that we must interview the vicar. As we arrived at the vicarage, at that comfortable moment between the savoury and the sweet, it seemed a good policy to wait until the vicar was through with his viands before we disturbed him, and as there was an inviting green bank under his garden hedge, we sat there and lunched. You know, bread and cheese, bananas and chocolate and that sort of thing, all rather inadequate when you cannot help imagining what a good lunch the vicar is enjoying within his walls on the other side of the hedge. We allowed sufficient time for the coffee to be served, wishing we had some ourselves, and then, at the end of what seemed a long preparation, we approached the house with our suggestion of a performance. We were greeted by a wretched little dog that barked and nosed my shins most uncomfortably, and then, more in answer to the barking than the bell, we suspected, came the manservant. "Ho! Punch and Judy!" he said superciliously, looking down his nose. But before he could dismiss us, I poured out a flood of self-praise and advertisement, at which the haughty fellow condescended to leave us in charge of the growling dog, while he took the leaflet to his master. He was soon back again, and we were not wanted. We trundled the barrow out of Lyminster with feelings of homeless outcasts. More comfortable houses exhibited bills inviting all of the world to the fair. How gay it all sounded, and what a merry day the morrow promised to be for Lyminster. But not for us. We had been rejected, forbidden our natural place, to which we had offered to contribute a little fun and gaiety for any immeasurable amount of pennies that might have been forthcoming. And we began to wonder, as the spiteful sometimes will, if that fair was a real matter of gaiety. We were those village people overflowing with sportive feelings and social merriment. Were those village people overflowing with sportive feelings and social merriment, or was it simply a grim business affair, a church in search of money, a church exploiting the trade of honest showmen in order to get money which it could not obtain on its own merits? Luckily, we forgot the answer to that question as we trudged away in the hot afternoon, wandering dreamily towards the downs and the woods. We fell in love with the meadows and the great trees that cast a cool shade for us, and all the wild flowers, the gaiety of the hedgerows. We groaned in the sun and rejoiced in the shade. We walked ignominiously among the motorists and the main road, and came into our own again on the by-road, turning southward down to Angmering, the home of Linda Kane. It doesn't actually say that, but it jolly well should. Just a pause for a moment, because Linda Kane does indeed live there, and let's just see how much we've got to go. We might get to the end of the chapter of this one. Let's have a look at what you're saying, just to give me a bit of a break. Yes, the crackle of the log fire to smooth the readings along. Perfect. Yes, I could actually move into the front room with the wood burner, couldn't I? Take a camera in there, actually. I could do that. I've got probably enough lead and a camera to set up. I might do that as we get into the colder days. Because I may nod off if I do that. Better late than never. Hope we're all well. Yes, Linda, we're about to move into Angmering. Enjoying very UCD. I'm not quite sure what UCD means. Thank you, Richard. Watching with a cuppa in front of an afternoon of log splitting. Yes. Well done, John. UCD. I thought I typed as much. What is UCD? What do you mean by that? Rebus says, only recently discovered this channel. Been doing a bit of a catch-up on the way to spend a wet Worthing afternoon. Well, you're very, very welcome, Rebus. Is that Rebus as in the detective, the Scottish detective in... I forget the name of the author now. you know, he does Rebus. He's a detective, isn't he? I can't remember. Was it Ian Rankin who wrote those? Edward Moulding says St Mary's on the Ford Road. Oh yes, that's right. TurboStream says you can't imagine someone letting a stranger into the kitchen these days whilst going off to the beach. You certainly can't. Yes, adjacent to Ford Open Prison it would have been. I guess 100 years ago that wasn't there. Not now, it doesn't, sadly. Windmill gone. Oh yes, these seas broke through the Klimping earlier this year and flooded an enormous area cutting off the west side of Littlehampton. Did it really? Limits to hold to great fate every year, except this one, of course. Yes, that's Rebus, says Andrew Norris. Isn't that what I just... Isn't that what I just said? Rebus AK 47M. That's Rebus, and you spell it Rebus. Linda Kane says, you're welcome in joining me in Angmering. All the world and his wife and kids seem to be moving here now. Let's find out in the last 20 minutes of the book. I hope I'm not reading it too fast, by the way. So, here was a little village completely to our liking. The decent cottages, the intriguing shops, and the comfortable inns, all grouped around a central green, were obviously composed for the exhibition of a Punch and Judy show. We hurried off to find a camp and would then give our performance in the village. But it was a good evening's work to find that camp. We walked out into the fields and found a farm labourer, very Sussex, who, as he chewed his tea, invited us very hospitably to camp anywhere we liked on his master's land. He waved a piece of bread and butter westwards. Over there, under a hedge, you'll find it, Lou. But perhaps we ought to see the boss first. Ah, you see him. You'll find him Upatus. Go along round to the left and turn down along by the pond uppermost. We disentangled the scents from the slurred directions and found the farmer's house, but were refused permission to camp because the farmer's lease prevented him from allowing caravans and tent dwellers on his land. A very annoying clause under the circumstances, which put our performance into grave jeopardy. Returning to the village, it was the baker who came to the rescue and put us into his meadow, an odd mangy plot above the houses, where we set up the tent under a sheltered row of handsome elms even, through which we could see in a proper English manner the grey checkered tower of the church. Is the tower grey checkered? I did a video fairly recently from Angmering. While I hurried to prepare the show for the performance, Winifred established the happy home. There was to be some soup for me after collecting the pennies, and I hurried down to the village before the children were in bed. It was just at that harassing moment before the theatre was completely packed that a tottering old man, very tall and gaunt, appeared in the field and, beckoning to me desperately, cried out with a feeble voice, "Come here! Come here!" I went up to him in a very ungracious mood when he said, "Oh dear, I've been so ill. I've been so ill. Would you go up to the pump and bring me a couple of buckets of water? Oh, I've been so ill. Oh dear." Who could have refused assistance under such circumstances, even though a Punch and Judy show and a collection of pennies were endangered? I trudged off to the baker's pump, peered into storehouses, kitchens and bakehouses before I found the missing baker very comfortably seated on a sugar box, smoking his pipe. He supplied the buckets, and, pumping them full of water, I hurried to the old chap, splashing most of the water into my shoes. When I reached the old nuisance, he'd begun walking away. "Bring them along here, will you? Bring 'em along to my chickens over here. Oh, I've been so ill. Come along, I'll show you. I've been so ill." Of course, the chicken run was at the furthest end of the field, and the old man, who had the key of the run, was very slow. Nobody knows, I thought, of the little troubles with which make Punch and Judy's show so difficult. It had been a busy day with miles tramped, and it was already late in giving a performance. I was on the point of rebelling against playing the Good Samaritan, but by this time the old man had got me fully under his command. "Just bring 'em along here. Now, put them in this dish. That's enough. Now, put some more in this tin. Not too much. That's plenty more to fill. Oh, yes, there's plenty more to fill. Oh, dear, I have been so ill." Oh, yes, he had me well in hand, and by this time the thirsting chickens and dying ducks were tumbling over themselves to get into the water. But with the last drop of water in the last dish, I put down the buckets and tore myself away to my own business, feeling very brutal as I left the old Job sitting on the coop, surrounded by his drinking chickens, and moaning his eternal refrain, "Oh dear, I have been so ill. I've been so ill." With a mixture of tears and comedy, it was not the right preparation for giving an amusing performance. But if you look at all closely at life, perhaps there is no time ever for giving a frivolous performance. On the other hand, perhaps it is one of the kindest deeds to put up an amusing entertainment that will break into the too serious consciousness of life and give the trageditions, as in tragedy, as opposed to trageditions, a moment's rest from their tragedy. At all events, in spite of much rigmaroling, I sauntered down to the green in Angmering, set up the show, and began to squeak. "That's the way to do it! That's the way to do it!" I've added that because I don't know whether they really did that. The village youths and the small fry made an immediate rush towards the theatre. 3 men, a lorry, and a Punch and Judy had descended upon the village a week or 2 ago, but the villagers were ready to see another. As my theatre went up, the boys began to be critical, not of me, but of the previous show, which they described as mucky, but mine, they advanced, was posh, even pretty. They gathered in closer, with obvious interest. Housewives came out of the cottages and crossed the road to the green. Flappers gathered around the youths, and the good old labourers with clay pipes took up their places in the crowd. They proved an excellent audience and laughed all in the right places. More than that, they were of a generous sentiment and took some initiative towards a collection, showing an impulse to pay for an uninvited performance. To Winifred, who by now had cooked the soup and joined the crowd, one woman said, "It must be hard work moving them figures like that for such a long time without stopping, and I don't suppose he gets much for it either. It can't be much of a living, can it?" she asked the showman's wife, who, of course, quite agreed. "And I forgot to bring my purse with me," she continued. "It's worth 3 isn't it? Here, Lottie,
Can you run along and get my purse? It's in the right-hand corner of the right-hand dresser drawer.
Lottie, who did not wish to miss any of the show, began to whimper in protest at being sent on an errand.
Get along with you,
said her mother, who was very stout.
I haven't the face to stand here without giving the poor fella something, and the faster you go, the quicker you'll be back. And if you can put the money, into the man's hat yourself, she shouted to Lottie, who was by this time halfway across the road to the cottage. During the performance, a car drew up from which alighted 2 men and 2 small boys. "Here," said one of the men to the boys. Here are some pennies for the man. You stand and wait for us and come. You stand here and wait for us to come back. Uncle and I are going to get some drink." But at that moment, the Reverend Mr. Black burst into puppet song, and the men, hesitating, remained to listen. One thing followed another in the show, and it was not until the end of the performance that the 2 men remembered that they were dying of thirst. Most of the audience were of the same mind, and in its small way, Angmering honoured the show, and we were not disappointed with this good-looking village, its white cottages, and the rambling old inns where large dogs lie sleeping on the steps. The children kindly helped to pack the show, their assistance being completely annulled by one imp among them who knotted all the cords, used the sticks as toy swords, rumpled the curtains, and tried to make a Rolls-Royce out of a humble barrow. Everybody pushed him off with threats of violence, all except his sister, who looked at him resignedly and said, "It isn't any use. We can never do anything with him." It was calm in the high meadow above the village. We supped to the chimes of the church clock, and with a view from the tent over the many meadows towards the sea. It was calm in the village above the village. We supped to the chimes of the church clock, and with a view over the tent, over the many villages, over the many meadows towards the sea. With a camp, with food and pennies all complete, and being exceedingly tired, we could sit in the field with equanimity, observe the last daylight and colour fade from the landscape, and watch the stars emerge from the luminous sky, which all seemed to be created to give a pleasant setting to the village of Angmering. It was so calm that not even were we disturbed by the 2 members of the audience who had followed us and sat a few yards away from the tent, watching our every movement for over an hour with a fixed and placid enjoyment. How beautiful that is. That's really lovely. And that ends chapter 10. And how magnificent Angmering has come out of that. And Linda must be very, very proud. And there we leave it, ladies and gentlemen, for yet another day of that remarkable and incredible story. I believe I'm trying to get hold of the first book, which would be wonderful to read. Anyway, there we are. That's that chapter. We have, it looks like we have about a third to go, or less than a third. Let's just go through some of the comments that we've had. Not now, it doesn't sadly, Windmill Gone. Yes, definitely not Lee Lawson's grandfather, who did the Punch and Judy show, at Angmering. Limister holds a great fate. Oh, yes, you're very welcome to join me. Tuning in from Florida, says Chris A. Hello, Chris A. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm on holiday from work, so this is the first live reading I've been able to enjoy. Oh, marvellous. Oh, marvellous. Well done, and thank you for coming. Turbo says, I can see you in the easy chair reading with the burner ablaze. Yes, I can see myself doing that. Waved a piece of bread and butter westwards. Actually, that would be that way. Tower is flint with random stone bricks, says Linda. Oh, the church tower. Thank you for that. This cameo is hilarious. I recall showing a blind fella around Manchester about 20 years ago. I was hijacked for 45 minutes, says Morton. Flappers. Yes, you don't see much about flappers these days. Well, it was the 30s. The Lamb or the Red Lion, says Linda Kane. Yes, which one? I wonder which one it was. Imp, great word. I remember the kids coming backstage and buggering around with the props when I did street theatre. Ah, yes. I had the same when I used to do the street theatre. Really enjoyed that, Richard. Thanks for the hour. Well spent. Thank you so much. I enjoyed reading that. He's such a great reader. He's a joy to read, especially trying to conjure up the characters on the fly. The Peep Show book will be in the post tomorrow, Richard. Oh, thank you so much. You should have it Monday or Tuesday. Oh, what a joy. Thank you, sir. I'm really looking forward to that. And when I get my van, I'm going to go down to Devon and try and follow in his footsteps. That would be superb. String puppets, then, not the traditional Punch and Judy by the sound of it. No, it's interesting, isn't it? I think from the pictures... No, but from the pictures of him doing it, he does have glove puppets. So perhaps there was a mixture of marionettes and glove puppets. Another marvellous afternoon reading. We're lucky to be in the audience. Thank you so much, Turbo. I appreciate that. Fab, Richard. Yes, sounds more like marionettes than glove puppets. Yes, it's interesting, though the pictures, I don't know if you recall. Hang on, I wonder if I can quickly conjure up the pictures for you. Just quickly go into the email box and find my email from the lovely Linda Kane. I should just quickly show you that, remind you of the pictures that in the photos that we have available. So here is one. Hang on a moment. From the World Encyclopedia of Puppetry Arts, we have this picture here, which are definitely glove puppets. But we also have, how do I get out of that? Gallery. Oh, that's right. There's his wheeled vehicle, but there is also, let's go into this one. Here is another picture of him, Walter Wilkinson, with his puppets, which clearly are glove puppets, as you can see here. No reference to any stringed ones. He's got some other books here which I must try and get hold of. But I mean, he's such a lovely writer, and it's fascinating because the if anyone fancies or can get hold of these for me, that would be amazing. Look at that, puppets through America, puppets in Wales, and what's that one? Puppets into Scotland. Oh, it'd be lovely to have this as a set of books. Wouldn't that be amazing? And to read those. My small collection of Wilkinson's books. Oh, how wonderful. I'm very envious, I have to say. Anyway, there we go. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. Quite different and more sophisticated. Yes, I think it must have been a very sort of sophisticated and because he had travelled around the world a bit, hadn't he? And he'd been probably influenced by a number of more European puppet shows than the sort of Policemen and Sausages and Kiss Me Quick Hats type of Punch and Judy. More probably Commedia dell'arte, I imagine, that he had done. Anyway, thanks for watching, he says, typing it up before we go. I appreciate everybody coming and all your wonderful comments. It's been an absolute joy to do this. I do love these readings. They're really, really fun. Yeah, the strings, perhaps the strings, he's referring to the cloth and the covers and the frame. I would imagine that yes, that he's probably got the backdrops are held on strings, held taut. Abe Books have a couple cheap, says Linda Kane. Oh, I must go over there and buy them before somebody else does. There's a lot of money going out this month, what with this van and the insurance on a van and what have you. And I need to get some bollards so that no terrible neighbour parks in my space when I've got this van. I need to have it looked after. Anyway, and Nigel says he's been following every inch of the way on maps. Yes, well, I need to go and do a bit more on the following in the footsteps of, but I've been a bit engrossed editing the canal trip, and I need to get out and do more adventures. Julia and I thoroughly enjoyed our canal trip, and we had a chat today saying we've got to keep up these adventures because they're so much more cinematic and, you know, enjoyable as a piece of entertainment, I think, than just the meanderings. But I think following in the footsteps of Walter and Roy Hudd apparently made a TV series in the 70s. I haven't seen it. I don't know whether it's on YouTube, but it would be interesting to do a similar documentary on that because he's so eloquent, isn't he? Anyway, take care. No Vogue show tonight. Another video tomorrow on the canal trip, another part of our saga. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been lovely. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Take care. I must go and clean the SE now and light the fire and get myself a bit warmer. So until next time, bye-bye. Bye-bye. That wasn't the one I wanted to press. It was indeed that one.